Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo holds the highest deposit of coltan in the world, rich in mineral resources which are significant to modern innovations. The blessings of the country have also proven otherwise. Since coltan was discovered on a commercial scale, the East African country has had more doom than boon. Its locals work their socks off on coltan mines for breadcrumbs and face health hazards that shape their life for the worse. Now, these coltan or cobalt riches also fueled one of the bloodiest wars since the turn of the century. Amidst the swath of challenges, does coltan still have some promise for Congo? Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. Now, coltan, the short form of columbite tantalite, is shaping the world's technological revolution. It is an important constituent of cell phones, laptops, and electric vehicles, and has its highest deposit in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has about 80% of the world's total. Now, the latest technological advancement in the world, 5G technology, has also automatically raised demands for coltan and cobalt. Now, the bottomless pits of this technology revolution is a country losing its present and future to lack, diseases, and death, with as many as 40,000 children working on mines every day. Now, its dangers are not in humans alone, as the number of eastern lowland gorillas has declined by at least 90% in DR Congo over the last 5 years. Some of the world's leading companies have been pinpointed as beneficiaries of the problems in DR Congo, with government corruption also seen as a significant factor in the underdevelopment of the country despite its mineral riches. Joining me to unpack this, I have with me Kambale Musavuli, who is an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo-Kinshasa, and Oluwole Ojewale, ENACT Regional Coordinator of Central Africa, ISS Dakar, Senegal. Gentlemen, good to have you both on the show. Thank you for your time. Let's start with you, Oluwole. Rather, let me start with Kambale. Let's start breaking it down, because looking at my device and everyone's cell phone, perhaps if we link it to all of that, it can make meaning to a lot of people watching us today. How do you describe coltan and cobalt, and what does this mean to the economy of DR Congo?
These two minerals are essential to modern technology, specifically for coltan. When it stopped being mined in large production, it was in the beginning of the First Congo War in 1996. Coltan is a mineral that's a high conductant of electricity and a high absorbent of heat. What does that actually mean? You remember in the early 1990s, your phone will get hot very quickly. The mineral itself, whenever it's put into your circuit board, is able to absorb the heat faster than other minerals, and also allows for electricity to pass through the circuit board much more efficient. It's cheap in costs, mainly because also of the war that took place, that many of the mining that took place in DRC in the early 1990s was done through a context of war, illegal exploitation of minerals. And the United Nations has published numerous reports regarding the pilfering of Congo's resources, particularly coltan. Now, for cobalt, Congo is the #1 producer of cobalt in the world. As we are discussing COP26 and going into this so-called new Green Deal, where the world is saying that we are moving to electric vehicle, you can't have an electric vehicle without lithium and cobalt. And Congo is the #1 producer of cobalt, and Congo and Zambia has the largest deposit in the world. So we see that the demand has increased. We know the mining corporations that exploit it.
Well, there seems to be a loss in that connection to Kambale. Kambale, I lost you for a bit, and now you're back. I see you're back. Apologies. We can continue now.
Yeah, but the fundamental question around coltan and cobalt is the question of sovereignty, resource sovereignty. Do Congolese people control these resources? Are they benefiting from the exploitation of it? In the conflict of war, are people illegally pilfering these resources held accountable? But we know that at least for the next 25 to 50 years, Congo will be central to its resources will be central for the development of modern day technology. And at this time, a fundamental question for Congolese and for Africans is what is it that we are going to do to make sure that in the final analysis, that the minerals exported in DRC benefit the Congolese people first before it benefit the multinationals and the so-called warlords who run rampant in the DRC.
Well, I'm excited that you've been able to break it down, giving us the, the difference between Cobalt and Coltan. Let me quickly come to Oluwole and see how he can help us out, to expatiate on these. Because, there are debates already over cobalt being a conflict mineral. And a while ago, Kambale has also tried to link it with what is happening in COP26. Now, let's come back to the issue of cobalt being a conflict mineral. How does this play out in world economy and what's happening at the moment in Congo?
Thank you so much, Sulaiman, and I think it's a very...
Well, you have to unmute yourself. I think you haven't done that.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I said
I'm unmuted.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much. I was trying to say it's a very good opportunity to meet you after listening to you for about a decade now. And thank you for this important conversation that you have brought up on coltan.
Thank you.
Congo is unique for certain strategic minerals, which start with diamond, gold, coltan, cobalt, and a whole number of other minerals. And you asked about how this plays out in trying to probably influence the instability that is being experienced in the DRC. One thing that is also very important that I need to put on the table is that the protracted war economy in the DRC is actually financed as a result of the access that some of these warlords also have to the vast deposit of coltan, gold, diamond, or any other strategic minerals in the DRC. So like the earlier speaker said, what we found out is the fact that even though this is supposed to reflect in human development indices in the DRC in terms of human development, in terms of socioeconomic development, but a whole number of issues revolving around the extractive sector, which has not been properly reformed. And coupled with the fact that Congo has experienced a number of crises in the recent time for the past 2 decades, it has affected the mining and trading of coltan, in particular in the DRC. And going back to your earlier question, you will realize that we can't really talk about this if we don't try to identify the primary place of these strategic minerals in the modern economy. This conversation is made possible today because our mobile devices are powered by coltan in a way. It is also possible because of the introduction and the fact that 5G is gaining strategic importance in technological development. So when you look at a whole number of issues that I've raised, you realize that Congo is very, very significant, not only to contemporary economy, it's also significant in the future economy that we are moving into, which is moving away from the perennial energy sources to cleaner energy. And you are going to, we need strategic minerals being mined in the DRC like cobalt, like coltan to be able to power this new economy. But this has been largely undermining the country as a result of the protracted war economy that I mentioned, imperialist interest in the country, and even combining that with predatory state practices by the neighboring countries within the Central African and East African countries who are also profiting illicitly from these strategic minerals that are found in the DRC.
Well, a whole lot is being, pushed out here. Let's reach out to Kambale to help us here. Kambale, you mentioned COP26. which is the UN 26th, climate change conference. I want us to talk more about that before we come back to looking at the conflict which Wale has highlighted. I didn't see that coming. So the moment you said, look, COP26, and these are some of the key issues. But again, if you look at what has been going on, it didn't quite actually catch the conversation of a lot of people there. Tell us more about this, and let's see how this can get the, required attention.
You can talk about work for climate change without DRC. Beyond even the minerals, Congo has the second largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon. So we know that we are essential to the climate change question. But specifically around cobalt, why did I mention that? I've listened to many of the organizations, stakeholders who participated in COP26, discussing how to decrease the consumption of oil and speaking about lowering the emission of carbon emission around the world. To do so, you have to move to new energy, new source of energy. And the new source of energy that's being presented to the world is an electric vehicle, right? People want to have the new Tesla batteries or the new Tesla vehicle or any other company that's building electric vehicle. You cannot have an electric vehicle without Congo's cobalt. That's a fact, right? And we know the mining companies that's getting access to it. We also know how it ends up in these companies who are making the vehicles. So as we are discussing lowering of emission and moving to that, we should ask ourselves, where will our cobalt come from? If Congo is the number one producer, clearly it's going to come from DRC. As we are getting it from DRC, are we fueling a conflict in the process? Are Congolese benefiting from the exploitation of the resources? Are they getting their fair share into that? So we can talk about a new Green Deal without discussing the raw material used to build the new economy, providing the new technologies. If we don't discuss where those resources are coming from, we are only repeating the cycle of violence, the cycle of exploitation. And in the final analysis, as you mentioned a moment ago about the conflict minerals, we can talk about conflict minerals without talking about the first thing that comes into that word, conflict. There is a conflict raging. Addressing the conflict will allow the Congolese people to benefit from it. And Congo, we have an opportunity now, as people are being conscious of the environment, to make sure that as we provide a solution for the environment, we are addressing the fundamental questions of the Congo, which is that the Congolese people must control their resources and benefit from the resources on the land.
Kambale, I'll stay with you before we go back to Wale, and it has to do with the Second Congo War, yes, which was said to have been fueled by the process from Coltan. And that is one conversation somehow leaders, try to evade. Let's bring this back to the table before we start talking about, control for your resource. People have died. The environment has been, destroyed, and this is still ongoing. How much of attention or understanding are African leaders or world leaders getting about this happenings in DR Congo?
I mean, policymakers around the world do know, I strongly believe they do know what is happening in the Congo, especially African leaders. It's the African peoples who do not know actually what's happening in DRC. Since 1996, Congo has lost over 6 million of its people due to two things. The invasions of DRC by its neighbors, Rwanda and Uganda, who are US allies on the war on terror. They invaded the Congo in 1996 and 98 and continue to support proxy rebel militias. So when we're speaking about these conflict minerals, right, there is a conflict. These rebel militia that we see, they are going to exploit it. There is an illicit trade of the resources out of the DRC. And this has been documented over the past 2 decades in numerous UN reports. The 2002 UN report actually documented clearly the list of 85 companies worldwide illegally pilfering Congo's resources. Beyond that, there's been numerous reports. Now, I say 6 million people have died. Viewers will listen to that and probably think about another thing and not grasp that I just said that about 6 times the population of Gabon has died in the Congo. Gabon has about 1.2 million people. Right? 6 million people have died due to these resources. We have the cell phone, we have the laptops, we have the DVD players this year, so we benefit from it. But how do you end it? If we don't address, that's why it's hard to separate the point I made about resource sovereignty. The war started because there was a boom in modern day technology and an increased need for technology and cheap labor and cheap cost of resources. To get access to these resources, it's easier to get in the context of conflict. That way you don't have to remunerate the people who are on the land, the people who own the resources. You have a destabilized government that's not able to actually address the issue. So to address the conflict, there is one key element that Congolese people have been clear about. We cannot address the conflict in the DRC if there is no justice. Over 2 decades of war, the people responsible for the conflict have not been held accountable. The United Nations has called what's happening in the Congo through the UN Human Rights Office in Geneva. They've called it war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in the competent court. Today, in 2021, no one has been tried for these crimes and held accountable for it. We believe as Congolese and the civil society in DRC that if there is a tribunal to hold people accountable, these pilfering resources will end. If a rebel is arrested and held accountable, if neighboring countries are held accountable, if multinationals are held accountable, and especially countries such as the United States and United Kingdom are also held accountable, that will send a signal that the things have changed. Can it happen? Yes, it can happen. Yeah, it's happened in different places. We can look at cases of Chad. I mean, I can go on and on about the question of justice, but the fundamental question that we want to address in DRC, in order to not have conflict minerals, we must have justice for the crimes taking place. That way, those who are doing illegal activity in DRC will know that it's no longer business as usual.
So, Wale, this is where you also come in now. Listening to Kambale, I think some of the key things that are going on, especially west of Africa, specifically in Nigeria's Niger Delta region, will come to mind. He's talked about, control of resources, which is very key. But again, the environment and the pilfering of what this has caused to the people. And somewhere in that story lies Rwanda, who also have a significant amount of coltan. How has both countries' practices, affected their relationship, especially looking at how they have been plunged into some form of conflict or the other, all because of some economic gains?
Thank you so much. I think if you weigh the options in terms of who is benefiting more in terms of a mineral deposit between Rwanda and Congo, I would say to a large extent, based on available reports, United Nations reports and other empirical findings that have emanated from the DRC, on Rwanda, and the entire Great Lakes region, I think I would say the Congolese have been shortchanged. And then what we are rather seeing is a situation whereby minerals that are being explored and mined in the DRC are actually processed in the neighboring country. And the value addition to those strategic minerals are actually taking place in the neighboring country. And that is the reason why I talked about the predatory state practices that are actually affecting Congo negatively. And then in terms of how the war economy has been financed in both countries, even in certain frontiers within the DRC now, there are still remnants of the FDLR, the armed group that fought during the Rwandan genocide, and a whole number of other armed groups who still possess certain territories where these strategic minerals are in large deposits. And like I said earlier in my intervention, what we are discovering is the fact that what is financing this war economy is still as a result of the access to these vast deposits of strategic minerals. So I think by and large, Rwanda has profited more from the minerals that are present in the DRC because of the value addition that is taking place in the country, because of the price differential for some of these strategic minerals as well. And that has informed the criminal economy that has emerged from the illicit trading of coltan and other strategic minerals, who are now passing through the corridors of neighboring countries into the global supply chain in the global north, especially with respect to these companies and organizations that are engaging in the manufacturing of new technology. But for me, my primary concern is actually for Congo. And the reason is not far-fetched. It is based on the fact that, like the Niger Delta part of the country that you talked about, there is no environmental justice is not taking place in the DRC, even though conflict are taking place, war are taking place over the years. But a more cynical dimension of this attrition that the people are experiencing in the DRC is actually the issues of environmental justice. I give you an instance. There are occasions whereby child miners are being used to explore some of these strategic minerals. There are empirical scientific evidence that shows that, for instance, in the case of coltan, there are children who have been diagnosed of a particular cancerous disease that is caused by radon, an element that is a substance that is being radiated by coltan. So these are occupational hazard risks that the younger children are being exposed to. And in the same way, you also talk about the number of persons that have died in the recent time as a result of this illicit mining and trading of coltan in the DRC. So there is the issue of environmental crime taking place. Environmental justice is not taking place for the people. And the mineral, the process of the mineral is actually not benefiting the Congolese people. I've traveled to Congo. And I know that my co-speaker, has lived in the DRC. I mean, this is a vast expanse of land with beautiful landscape. But what you find out is that over the years, for the past 4 or 3 decades, imperialist interest in the country has not allowed the strategic minerals to actually work for the people in terms of the exploration and utilizing their resources to actually develop the people. So rather than Congolese people profiting from the proceeds of these strategic minerals, imperialist agenda and then these predatory state practices among the neighboring countries is actually what is undermining them from being able to profit from these strategic minerals.
Well, Kambale, Wale has opened another, concern here, and it has to do with, first, we're looking at children who are exposed to some of the illicit activities in DR Congo there. Perhaps maybe we should also just mention some bit of what is gotten from, coltan, so that people can better appreciate it. When wherever you are in the world, there's a bit of Congo or Congolese material wherever you are in the world, and that's just it, because it is used in making surgical appliances, electronic devices, phones, electric vehicles, and is even at the heart of the 5G technology. Now, so Kambale, help us here now. We're talking about righting the wrong now. First, let's look at the future of Congo, the future of the continent of Africa, the children. Is anyone, speaking on their behalf, talking about the exposure to the harm from mining this mineral?
The Congo is speaking about the youth and the children in the DRC. And the youth of the DRC are very impressive to me in what they've done for the past decade in terms of even wanting to have a say in the decision-making process in the country. I mean, Congo has a population of now close to 100 million, the last statistics that came out this year. So we are close to Nigeria. We are the 4th largest country by population on the African continent. But half of our population is under the age of 18, and the majority are Congolese women. So this youth is really the engine of transformation for the entire Congo. And if they're able to have their basic needs met, they can completely transform Africa. Because when we're talking about children in the mine, we're not asking ourselves, why are children going to the mines, right? Should they be in school? Yes, they should be in school. Well, why aren't they in school? The people have been put in a state of abject poverty that it's not just the mine that they are subjected to go to make resources hands meet, right? Congolese make less than $1 a day, right? $30 is being lucky a month to actually have to survive in DRC. So a country so rich, where they said the wealth of DRC, of its mineral wealth, is $24 trillion, which is US and Europe GDP combined. Congo alone could wipe up debts of many African countries, right? But the people themselves have no jobs. Over 90% unemployment rate in DRC, according to the World Bank. I say 90%. That's not my number, right? The World Bank has estimated that 90% of the Congolese do not have a formal job to be able to sustain themselves. So you have children, you have adults who are finding ways to make money. If you go to the mine and you are mining under unsafe and hazardous conditions, you are able to get resources to take care of your family. So if you are not ending the exploitation that's taking place in DRC, we will continue to have children in the mine. So to address the question of having children in a hazardous situation in the mines, we must address the question of the conflict. We must make sure that the representation of DRC is reflected. And I will go even much more historically. Now, I think it's important for viewers to not listen to the story of the Congo and say, this is a situation that's happening somewhere else. I strongly believe that until Congo is stable, Africa will not be able to advance. Its wealth, its potential can completely transform the entire African continent. Kwame Nkrumah understood it. As he planned for a United States of Africa with a capital in Kinshasa, actually, he believed that the Congo River should be harnessed to provide electricity to the entire African continent. That's actually the potential of its river. The Congo River can provide electricity to the entire African continent, Southern Europe, and the Middle East. He strongly believed that if Patrice Lumumba was successful at gaining power in the DRC with his comrades and be able to organize the country properly, we will be able to feed the entire African continent. Why? We know today that Congo has the agricultural capacity to feed the entire world until 2050, when the world's population is 9 billion people. We are only 7 billion people right now. He also believed, Kwame Nkrumah, that if Congolese have control of its wealth, its people could work and transform the entire continent by having access to its resources, the diamond, the cobalt, and so on. So as I see Africa not advancing, I'm seeing conflict around, I always ask myself, do Africans realize that in the heart of Africa, the only African country with 9 bordering nations is in turmoil, that if it's stable, it will affect 9 African countries and transform the African continent. And that's the call for the viewers, for all who are listening. The development of modern technology is important, but we must answer the question of peace and stability in DRC.
Well, Kambale and Wale, it's a fine place for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about what more we should be looking at, possibly how much of attention, world attention. As Kambale has said, if it breaks in Congo, definitely it will affect not just the continent, but the world. Imagine if all else truly and surely fails in the mining of cobalt, what will happen in the entire West? That's when we return. Well, DR Congo, like many other African countries with rich deposits and reserves of minerals, do not get their value. Shortchanged, hardly rewarded, and cast aside, the riches of the nation don't reach the people. Now, families dig for coltan in the backyards, yes, and living rooms, and risk the medical dangers that come with it for the sake of money. Now, industry human rights standards must be developed for the benefit of the people, especially young children who are missing out on education and a shot at a good life. I still have with me Kambale, Musavuli, and Oluwole, Ojewale. Gentlemen, thanks for your time, and Africa appreciates both of you. Let's start with you, Wale. You know, you've heard all about and probably, you know, heard about, seen the crimes that come with the mining of these minerals. Now, share with us your experience, if you will.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think my experience is going to revolve around the recent research that I carried out in the DRC, which I tried to look at mining and illicit trading of coltan. And a number of things have emerged in terms of what I found in the DRC, particularly in terms of the dimensions of organized crime, which involve the state actors, non-state actors, international mining companies, local residents who are also trying to get a means of survival of the minerals that are of vast deposits in the DRC. But what is also very, very important to me is the environmental dimensions of the use, the economic dimensions of the use that the people experience, and how these has affected human development outcomes in the country. So just to quote some figures, I think it's an anomaly of some sort that a country that is seated on mineral deposits of strategic minerals that have been valued in excess of 24 trillion US dollar, 24 trillion US dollar. It has become a poster of poverty when we discuss issues about human development, endemic poverty, and then wanton human rights abuses as being displayed on the screen now. And the second thing is the fact that it is also estimated in terms of how much the country is losing annually, which is over 4 billion US dollar, particularly as a result of the illicit economy that is taking place within the extractive sector. So when you look at all this and you consider the plight of the people, like the earlier speaker said, I think you realize that Congo is strategically positioned in terms of the contemporary and historical economy. It has played a strategic role in the supply of strategic minerals that we need to power global economy, whether in the industrial age economy or technology age economy that we're moving into. And then the second thing, which is also very, very important for me, is the fact that in places where these strategic minerals are being mined, there is little presence of state authority. What do I mean by this? There's limited statehood in some of these places. Most of those places are government places that are not even accessible for legitimate authority. So clandestine economy is being operated, business deals are going on, and then there is really little control. It has become an all-commerce affairs in terms of plundering the Congo, because I think when we talk about DS advocacy, we must call a spade and come out plainly in terms of the ills that are affecting the country. So a number of experiences in terms of human development indicators. We've heard about the figures about the poverty, incident in the country. We've talked about the unemployment incident in the country. This is not supposed to take place. And I think for me, if we begin to move in the direction of recommendations, there are things that the state actors, the Congolese government need to do. There are things that the civil society organizations need to do. There are things that multilateral agencies like International Conference of the Great Lake Regions needs to do. There are things that the African Union needs to do. I know there are sufficient reports that have been pushed out by the United Nations since 2000. But in terms of acting on those reports, we are seeing little in terms of implementation of justice, both environmental justice and the regular justice, that is supposed to come out of the protracted war experience that the people have had. So, and I think they are, and that is the reason why I appreciate what you are, what this conversation is achieving through your channels, Live Central. There's a need to escalate this conversation to international audience. And I think this platform is achieving that. So that everybody that is using whether iPhone, Samsung, Sony, a number of electronics that we're using, including our laptop, needs to know that some of these devices are actually powered on the strength of child labor in the DRC, on the strength of the blood of the people. That is the reason why you have conflict minerals, you have blood minerals. A number of things are taking place in the DRC that people don't get to know about how the people are being shortchanged. And we need to push this conversation beyond the rhetorics, actually having actionable points that can be acted upon by the state actors within the DRC, by the civil society in the DRC, by the local and international media as well, in trying to escalate the plight of the people. What is needed in the DRC is complete extractive sector reform that actually delivers the development outcome for the people. That is not taking place because of the of different factors that I've highlighted earlier. And it's important that we put these on the front burner. The experience of the people in the DRC is not palatable. As I'm talking to you, if you talk to the people in the DRC, it will surprise you to know. When I was in the DRC, one of the people that I interacted with told me, he said a number of people who live in the eastern DRC are not going to see Kinshasa till they will die. Do you know the reason? Because the country is not even integrated, internally. There are no good roads, and then there are no infrastructural facilities are at lowest ebb that you can imagine. Whereas the country is sitting on top of over 24 trillion naira worth of strategic minerals that are benefiting both neighboring countries, developed countries of the global north, and even the underdeveloped, the developing countries of the global south. So these are issues that I think not only UN should be talking about. The African Union needs to talk about this. There is no, substantial conversation on the part of the African Union on this, even though UN report has been, coming out for the past 2 decades now. So there's a need to have that holistic response, which involves a number of these actors that I've actually highlighted.
Okay, Wale, thanks. Let me bring in Kambale. Quite a lot for us to ponder on there, Wale. Kambale, listening to him, it doesn't look like there's an end in sight, because daily as new inventions and technological advancement comes, all eyes will be on DR Congo because they still have the materials for them to actualize some of these key things. Recall in 2001, there was that campaign in Europe and America called the Blood Tantalon, where some had this placard, "No blood on my cell phone" campaign, but it wasn't enough. And it suddenly died down. And now it looks like the world will look to an increase in the demand of cobalt and coltan in the coming years. How can DR Congo strategically place itself for the goods and protect its people?
The problem in the Congo cannot be a Congolese problem only. It has to be an African problem. As long as an African country is destabilized in the way that it is, with no objection of other African countries, we will have these challenges in DRC. And I'll use also another example. Scandinavian country, particularly, if I'm not mistaken, Norway, is a resource-rich country that has oil. You don't see the type of killings that's taking place in DRC in Norway, right? So they do have the wealth, they don't have the same issue. But you see issues in DRC in Afghanistan, you see issues in DRC in Bolivia and other places. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the system that's causing that an African nation that's so rich be in this type of situation? We must question the way we consume. We must question the way we allow, if I may say, capitalism to destroy the African continent. Can Congolese people achieve peace and stability? Yes. And as I say, it has to be a Pan-African affair. Why I believe so? We need so as Africans. There was a regime in South Africa called the apartheid regime. It was an inhumane regime. As Africans, we said, we will do everything in our power to make sure that South Africans are able to live in peace and dignity. We fought the apartheid regime and were successful at ending the apartheid regime. The situation in the Congo is similar, right? I'm seeing it as the apartheid movement of today. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but it is inevitable for peace and stability to come to DRC. It has to come to the conscience of Africans. Can we imagine, in the discussion we just had, my colleague just mentioned that it has to be a discussion at the African Union. Do you know that this year, that the president of the African Union is the Congolese president, actually, Felix Tshisekedi, right? Right now, the African Union has the head of the African Union as a Congolese, but somehow he's not speaking on behalf of the Congolese people. He's not engaging other African leaders on behalf of the Congolese people. That reminds you of the apartheid regime. If you are trying to deal with the apartheid regime to address the fundamental need of the South Africans, you are not going to get results. So Congolese are caught in a vicious circle where the government is not able to address it. Are they fighting? Yes. Some of the information that the United Nations has published in its report is through Congolese researchers. The report that caused about 60 mining companies to renegotiate the contract came from a Congolese. The Lutundula Commission report in the early 2000s looked into the odious contracts we had. Some contracts, there were contracts where mining companies were getting 90% and Congo was getting 10%. A civil society movement ensued and put pressure for those to actually change. But so the civil society in the Congo continued to fight. And even saw it in question of the elections. The challenge that we continue to face is, as Congolese are organizing and mobilizing on the inside, they're not in the discussion in Addis Ababa. They're not in the discussion in London. They're not in discussion in the New York, Washington, D.C., or in Paris. So this is why a platform such as this is important, to share the narrative with the African people and say, the Congolese people are fighting to regain dignity, to regain control of their country. We need allies in Lagos. We need allies in Accra. We need allies in Nairobi and many places across the African continent. So that when the issues of the Congo is brought up, you can lift up. You never know. You may be in a room with Buhari. You may be in a room with Uhuru Kenyatta. You may be in a position where you put pressure on the mining corporations illegally pilfering Congo's resources. Getting the information is important. And I will end by saying that it's also important, as we discuss this issue, that it doesn't sound and appear as the conflict does not have a source, right? That it's a very abstract and general discussion. The exploitation of DRC has a historical lens that we have to look into it. It started in 1885. In 1885, after the Berlin Conference, when Congo was given to King Leopold, and Congolese hands were being chopped off, and 10 million people died under King Leopold's rule right after 1885. Why did they die? There was exploitation of rubber. Why were they getting rubber? They needed rubber for the tires of the cars and the bicycle. There was a boom in the automobile industry, in the car industry at the time. So the exploitation took place and 10 million people died. But there were people who fought King Leopold. E.D. Morale, George Washington Williams, Booker T. Washington. There was a whole international movement to bring an end to the suffering of the Congolese. They were successful at stopping King Leopold. The exploitation continued later. During World War I, copper of DRC was needed for the rebuilding of Europe. Even in World War II, they used the uranium from DRC to bomb Japan, right? And there was a world outcry about that exploitation. And Congolese resisted. It was an African movement from 1945 to 1960 that brought the Congolese independence. That's why I continue to insist. Congolese would not have been independent if it wasn't for the Pan-African movement. Young Congolese came to Accra in 1958, men with Nkrumah and others, as there was a wave of young Africans mobilizing to change the continent. Some of them actually came to Congo to fight and mobilize with Patrice Lumumba there. So we became independent, not because we were Congolese, but because we were Africans. We are in a situation today where this conflict is happening. And I believe If it doesn't end in DRC, we're already seeing it. It's going to go across. We are in West Africa right now. We are discussing the uranium in the Sahel, how the so-called jihadists are appearing mysteriously. And no one is talking about how come jihadists are not catching those geologists or people who are mapping where the uranium is. How come they're not going where the foreign military bases are, but the West Africans are the one dying? So we have seen it in the Congo. We're seeing it across Africa in key countries that have resource wealth, and that we have to look at the situation in Congo, not what can Congolese people do, but also what we as Africans have to do to unite and end all conflict that's happening on the African continent.
Well, Wale, it comes back to some of the key things you raised, and Kambale has just said, yes, he's with you on the same page. It's not a Congolese problem, it's an African problem, and every African must be on the same page to see how this can be addressed. But quickly here, and he's also reminded the continent that Felix Tshisekedi presently is leading the African Union. So how can, experts like yourselves and every other African bring this to bear so that African leaders can see some of the key things? I mean, looking back to some of the conversations we've had tonight, children are out of school, the humans are affected, and even the wildlife is also being affected. So how can this be put on the front burner about a country and a continent that has so much, yet nothing?
Thank you so much. I think the number one thing is to see it as an African problem. And Congo is not the only country on this plane. You mentioned Nigeria when we started this conversation about issues of environmental justice in the Niger Delta. It is on this issue that Kesararua lost his life over 20 years ago. It's an issue that every opportunity that we have, whether as in research, as in media, we need to ensure that we are actually speaking to the duty bearers. And I think for me, one of the strategic recommendations that I will push forward is the fact that there's a need for the African Union to have a standard rapporteur on the mineral extraction or whatever you call it in terms of illicit mining and trading of strategic mineral in the DRC. Like I said, I think to a large extent, we've received and read and seen a number of UN reports. But it baffles me why African Union has remained perpetually silent on this issue. And if we truly want to push anything as an African solution, I think this is this is a major pivotal platform to be able to do that. So, like you have rightly said, what we need to do as researchers, policy analysts that are talking about this thing is to continue to seize platforms like this that we're having. Media engagement is very, very important in this. We speak to media, the media houses, media outlets in the Western world. We speak to media outlets on the continent. We speak to media outlets everywhere we can find it. And then when they also gather for AU meeting, it has to be a civil society pressure that is going to come internally from the DRC and their allied partners. And that is the reason why nobody can do this alone. There's a constant engagement that the civil society must be doing in terms of putting this on the front burner. And I think the work is actually going to start internally. The civil society organizations within the DRC, within the Central African region, need to make this to come to the perpetual awareness of the President Felix Tshisekedi, particularly with respect to the strategic role that is occupying now at the AU, bringing the plight of the people close to him. And I think we can also not discuss this issue without making reference to political collusion in this. Because why will it be in such a strategic position now? And it's not talking, and the plight of the Congolese people with respect to extractive minerals is not coming to the front burner. So it's a conversation that we need to have. There's also what they call certification scheme, which everybody, a number of organizations, civil society organizations are actually pressing within the DRC. There is also the need to formalize that. There is the EU, the OECD, the Kambale protocol, a number of them. There's a need to formalize this. And I think one thing that is also very, very important that we must put on the front burner is that there is a multi-layer level of civil society engagement in the DRC, and it's a very active one. But I think what has not really been empowered are the local community, civil society, and opinion leaders and leading voices. They also need to be entrenched in this battle. And what role are they going to play? They are going to play strategic roles in terms of constituting an observatory group who monitors incidents of extractive sector within their local communities, and also try to use that report to validate or invalidate whatever any state actor, maybe like CIMAPE or international non-governmental organizations that are also engaging in the certification process within the DRC are doing. Because these are the local people that have the local content in terms of information, and they are abreast of the fact in terms of what is happening. So that is very, very important. But I will anchor on this. To be able to drive home the point, there's a need to build a continuous synergy between the media and the organized civil society within the country, in continually pushing this to the front burner with the AU, with the United Nations, with the International Conference of the Great Lakes region, and then any other relevant partners that we have something to say as far as the plight and the extractive sector plight is affecting the Congolese people in the DRC. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach. It has to be a comprehensive approach. And then there's a need to also put political pressure on the duty bearers. And I think the starting point on this note is the president of Democratic Republic of Congo himself, who is now occupying the strategic position of the African Union.
Well, be rest assured, gentlemen, as we appreciate your time, we'll stay on this. Kambale, we'll hope that in the nearest future, we should be able to have you and Oluwole back again. We must put this on the front burner. We must continue to talk about this, particularly about the children that are out of school and the hazard this is causing to the children, to the environment, as well as to the wild. The blessings of Congo are currently, in a way, its biggest problems. But with the right leadership, as both of you have highlighted, and support of the world, there is a gentle, sleeping, resting giant there in Central Africa. That giant needs to wake and wake up. Thank you for being such a nice company. Kambale, Musavuli, and Oluwole Ojewale. To our viewers across the continent, many thanks for watching. I'm Sulaiman. See you again.